Alright everyone, this is something that people who are like maybe regular viewers of this channel, you probably already sort of get it. But for anyone that doesn't or anyone that sees it, it's an important topic to talk about. And it's also important that you, the viewer, don't just absorb the material here passively. When I'm talking about topics like this, you should start up a conversation, replicate it, spread word, because a lot of people, I would say maybe the majority of people, don't actually understand this concept. Their brains are a little bit scrambled by linguistic propaganda. They think if someone is in Antifa, well, anti-fascist, they oppose totalitarianism, which is totally the exact opposite of reality. It's sort of like the Patriot Act. That's not patriotism, it's the exact opposite. It's basically shut up and let the government go in dry from behind, or you're a terrorist lover or something. It's a bunch of bullshit. The new fascism that's come not just to the US, but to the West at large, is led by those who claim to oppose it. Essentially, if you were to believe the so-called forces of anti-fascism, and I'm not just talking about Antifa, I'm talking about all of the social justice warriors, all of the censorship-loving, I would say, authoritarian left, and not the center left. The actual liberals, like in the Democratic Party, are now being chased out of the party by these pink-haired snowflake freaks. If you listen to them, fascism essentially is, as they would term it, totalitarianism is the word they're actually looking for, but they always misconstrue it for fascism specifically. I'm not sure why, but we'll just use the term authoritarianism in the most generic garden variety sense. That essentially it's marked by not wanting to censor unpopular opinions, not wanting to disarm the public, thus making it, helpless against tyranny, by wanting government to be constrained, that is, not as able to abuse people, by wanting to constrain corporatism, corporate power, by wanting to hold back the scope of government in a more general sense by preventing it from stealing and making itself privy to all of your money. That, according to the so-called anti-fascists of today, but according to the so-called opponents of authoritarianism, is what authoritarianism is. Meanwhile, they would say resistance to that takes the form of using identity politics profusely, breaking people apart by race, by gender, by creed, in order to give it political importance as an issue. Trying to take away firearms from private civilians. They never talk about police. They never talk about the military. How very funny is that? Or the bureaus. The IRS has machine guns now. They gave them those about half a decade ago, and a lot of people didn't bat an eye, which I thought was hysterical. It's like, yes, the Department of Education needs firearms. It's really, really important for them to have a very good stockpile. Why? Nobody knows. Nobody could explain it at the time. Nobody's bothered to explain it now. That anti-fascism is led by wanting to silence dissenters, essentially those that are guilty of wrongthink. And when you go through this, it is an exact inversion of reality. What they've done is attempt to invert the term authoritarian. For instance, they think, well, Trump is authoritarian because, X, Y, and Z. Therefore, all of his fans are also, by extension, they're like Nazis. They need to be silenced. You shouldn't be able to wear the MAGA hat without fearing being randomly attacked on the street. You shouldn't be able to vote for certain political figures, to exercise your right to vote, and then talk about it like publicly without being harassed. You shouldn't be able to voice certain concerns or opinions or ideas online. Otherwise, multi-billion-dollar private corporate entities should be silencing you. That's what they believe is anti-fascism. They are literally that delusional. Now, we've got to identify different groups of people that are part of this moral panic-driven situation. We've got to realize that they're not all believing this for the same reason. Sometimes those that understand this, that understand that the so-called anti-fascists or resistance or whatever they term themselves tomorrow, they're not homogenous. Sometimes people misconstrue them as this, and so it limits their ability to try to change those minds. Most of them, I assure you, can change their minds. They can be brought to the light of reality. They can be shown, objectively and truthfully, you are fighting for the bad guys. But here's the thing, there are different groups involved. Corporations want to be involved because it allows them to have a large captive audience that will buy their brands and encourage them to actually adopt some of the roles of government that government is constitutionally constrained from adopting, like digging into your privacy, like preventing you from speaking freely, like in some cases even disarming you. Banks, for example, tied with Silicon Valley in many ways as they are, refusing to give loans to firearm manufacturers if they don't toe the line and stop producing certain kinds of weapons that for some odd reason they've specifically decided to target, despite their similarity to existent hunting rifles. We see this all the time. So the first group is corporate. The second group is government. Government wants authoritarianism. They want these social justice warriors because it makes for good wedge issues. It literally has nothing to do with anything for them other than a campaign idea. Now, most of these politicians, they immediately forget about their promise to suppress the bigots or whatever once they're elected. They don't talk about it anymore because it's just a campaign issue. But they've stoked the flames of that pitchfork-waving mob. Then you've got the self-righteous. Who was it? Kaczynski, oddly enough, has identified this particular group, although he conflates that as the whole core of the moral panic-driven left. And he only focuses on the left because he's, I guess, a trad con. Basically, he's a primitivist of sorts. It's very funny. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, in his manifesto, very, very funny. Some good points, some things he honestly overlooks. He overlooks right-wing bigots, which do exist, like the moralists of the Evangelocon movement, that I think he went to prison before that became an issue there for about a decade, so that could be why. Smart man, just very, very paranoid, I think, in many ways. But we've got to realize there are other groups. You've also got the Soccer Moms Club, that is, people who are moral busybodies. You can never change their mind. If they weren't haranguing for censorship online or for disarming people, it would be something else. Essentially, they just want others to be miserable like them. They want to take people's freedom. And then you've got the final group, and this is the largest. The largest group is simply those that have been fooled by propaganda. They think that they're fighting for what's right. Look carefully at history. We have a one-dimensional look at groups in the past. When we look at communists, for example, communists, we say, well, they all believed in communism, they wanted to grind people down, they're all godless. And so. No. Most people that followed communism were noble at heart and believed it was right to follow it. Those people that joined the Red Army, the Glorious Revolution, they thought they were doing what was right because they were fooled by propaganda. The average Nazi was not some strong Central Party member that fully absorbed and believed in everything and was like, oh yeah, we need these camps. They're a good thing. Absolutely we need to invade Poland. No, the average person who joined their movement was a regular individual who thought they were doing what was right or necessary at the time. This has been the case. The road to hell is paved with great intentions. The average person who joins one of the great pogroms and purges of history thinks they're doing what's right. You can't look at the people that are trying to spread censorship online and basically destroy our republic, to destroy the constitutional fabric of this country. They've been propagandized and fooled into believing that it is necessary. They've been fooled into believing there is a literal army of Nazis that need to be censored online. They've been fooled into believing that if they go and send their kid to school, they're probably going to get shot because of a scary assault rifle. They've been convinced that if you don't love John McCain, that you're a traitor to the Republic. They've been convinced of these things. They're wrong. They're deluded, but they've been lied to. You can't blame them and lump them in with ideologues that have bad faith. You can't lump them in with some corporation that wants to censor people in order to make more money off of more positive branding by visibly kicking bigots off of their platform or whatever they brand it tomorrow. Where it's a quality filter. It's a hate filter. It's being family friendly. No, it's all just censorship. You're in bad faith. You know better. Silicon Valley knows better because they have all of the analytics. They know what's said online. They know that there's no army of far-right individuals to actually suppress, and that they're suppressing people selectively in order to build their brand with the lay people who are waving pitchforks and torches at the moment. They know this. But the average person, I'd say like 80-90% of these people honestly believe the shit that they believe in. They are in good faith. It's just bad methods. That's how you learn. You've got to understand the enemy before you can combat them and realize that the vast majority of them are basically the equivalent of conscripts. Unwilling parties. They think that they're doing what's right, or they feel compelled by peer pressure to believe in corporate censorship and disarmament, and that free speech should not be considered. Free speech doesn't extend anything that offends me. The easily offended snowflakes are a small minority of this group. They simply are the most vocal, and they bully anyone that steps out of line. It's like when one of their own, like Maher, when he steps out of line and says, well, I'm not so sure about this particular instance of censorship. I'm not so sure it's helpful. They jump down his throat and try to silence him through targeting advertisers of stuff. We saw this with Bannon the other day. It's basically, we think that Bannon's a bigot. He shouldn't be allowed to give an interview. And so they browbeat, what was it, Newsweek or something, or The Economist, into deplatforming him. Because they're part of a pitchfork-waving mob. But a lot of the people that are doing that, they're just sort of keeping up with the Joneses, they're bored soccer moms, or they actually believe the propaganda. They actually think that Bannon's like Heinrich Himmler. And so they want to silence him. They think that there's a threat. There is no threat. It's all a lie. It's all an illusion that's been spread by the actual fascists, the actual totalitarians like Dworkin and the Krasensteins and the Maxine Waters and John McCain's and other assorted warmongering assholes of the world, the wedge issue exploiting bigots, the actual evildoers of our time. But they've managed to convince people. Much like Stalin or Lenin convinced people, hey, they're the enemy. Those bourgeois liberals are screwing us all over. They kill them all. They convinced most people that that was true at the time. Now, of course, in retrospect, we look back and say, wow, what a butcherous time that was. Yeah, at the time, it sounded pretty good to the average Russian. We've got to understand that. That's about all. Peace out.